She walked into the VIP terminal wearing a hoodie. No heels, no assistant, no name. Anyone cared to know. Within minutes, security detained her. Laughter followed. They thought she was a stowaway. They didn't know she was married to the man who owned the entire airport. And when his jet landed, so did the truth with the force of justice and the silence of a storm. This isn't just a story about humiliation, it's about power in its quietest form. Stay with us, because what happens next will flip everything you believe about class identity and dignity. It was the kind of silence that felt rehearsed, the kind that wasn't born from respect, but from scrutiny. A vacuum where judgment gathered its breath, where people's eyes sliced sharper than security scanners, where every glance carried a price tag. And into that silence, Lena Rowan walked. The Elmcroft Skyport VIP terminal wasn't a place you simply entered. It was a threshold gilded and glass-bound, where legacy and luxury merged beneath chandeliers the size of family fortunes. It didn't smell like a normal airport. Here, the air was filtered through imported Cyprus fine leather and the bite of Tom Ford's most exclusive cologne. Her entrance cracked the illusion like static in a symphony. She wore a hoodie, forest green and creased with the shape of real life. Her sneakers bore stories the tarmac couldn't read, scuffed soles, paint flecks, and one shoelace knotted with a safety pin. Her hair was tied in a simple bun with a fabric band that had once been part of her mother's old pillowcase. In her hand, she held a backpack, not monogrammed, not leather, just canvas faded and functional. It didn't match the terminal, and neither did she. Yet she walked with the kind of calm that unsettles those who need labels to feel superior. She didn't flinch when eyes turned, didn't pause, when whispers ignited like gas under pressure. Because Lena Rowan was not there to be seen, she was there to meet someone, but Elmcroft didn't care who you came for. Not unless your name rang in the halls of Zurich and Singapore and Monaco in the same breath. And Lena's name, well, that's the thing. No one here knew it. The Watchers. Do you see that, whispered a manicured woman in navy silk. Next to her, a silver-haired man adjusted his platinum cufflinks. She must be staff or... Someone wandered in from the general terminal. I don't think so, said another voice sharp. She's carrying a bag, like she thinks she belongs here. A chorus of amused hums followed. They looked at her like she was a disruption in their curated tableau. A reminder that reality still existed outside these glass walls, that not everything could be filtered with a concierge's smile. But Lena, she just kept walking, across the marble that gleamed like frozen milk, past a reception desk shaped like a crescent moon where the staff wore vests stitched with gold thread and shoes that never dared squeak. She headed toward the far side of the lounge where arrivals were privately handled, behind tinted partitions. Until, excuse me, miss. The voice cut in, professional yet cold enough to frost glass. Lena turned slowly, calmly, as if she'd been expecting this exact moment. The man who approached had the build of a soldier and the badge of a watchdog. His uniform was navy starched, stiff with gold braids around his shoulders and a glinting nameplate. Trent Wallace, head of VIP security. Do you have an appointment here? He asked, eyes sweeping her attire with no effort to disguise the distaste. No appointment, Lena replied softly. I'm meeting someone. Trent tilted his head. This area is for Sapphire-class travelers only, private access. You'll need to show documentation. She reached into her backpack and retrieved a book dog-eared annotated in her own handwriting. Wrong item, Trent said dryly. I'm not here to impress anyone, Lena replied, her tone even nearly academic. I'm here because someone's expecting me. And who exactly would that be? Her lips curved. Not quite a smile, just memory. Damian Rowan, name drop. Now the room did react. You didn't say that name lightly at Elmcroft. Not unless you wanted to cause a minor earthquake. Not unless you had something to back it up, like a contract signed with Aerospace Blood or a deal inked in Tokyo's financial district. A socialite in heels stumbled slightly. A hedge fund heir looked up from his tablet. Even Trent paused. You know Mr. Rowan? He asked, voice tight. I do. Trent's eyes narrowed. He pulled out a slim silver device and began scrolling through the private manifest. I don't see your name. I wouldn't expect you to. Ma'am, Trent said, sterner now. If you're not on the manifest and you don't have access credentials, I'll have to escort you out. Then I suggest, she said quietly, you wait 5 minutes. Her words didn't carry a threat. They didn't need to. It was her calm that unnerved him. It was the way she stood, not like a woman trying to sneak into a world she didn't belong to, but like a woman waiting for the world to remember it belonged to her. The ones who sneer at the front desk. Danica Moreau watched the scene unfold with clinical interest. At 34, Danica had made herself a legend at Elmcroft. A former private equity darling turned terminal manager. Her heels were custom Louboutins. Her laugh was sharper than her eyeliner. Her job wasn't just to manage the VIP lounge. Her job was to filter reality, and Lena Rowan hoodie and all was a glitch. Danica glided forward like a shark under glass. "Is there a problem, Officer Wallace?" she asked sweetly. Trent gestured discreetly toward Lena. "This individual claims she's meeting Damian Rowan." Danica turned her gaze, measured, polished. "Oh," she said, lips pursed. "Does Mr. Rowan normally rendezvous with college backpackers in the middle of classified airspace?" Lena said nothing. Danica leaned closer. "You're lucky we don't call airport control." "She's not causing a scene," Trent offered, but Danica raised a finger. "Yet, and when she does make sure you log the footage, security audit, you understand." Then turning to Lena, her voice dipped low. "You've made a very expensive mistake, darling." And with that, she pivoted back to her glass throne at the reception desk. Lena remained still. She did not argue. She did not shout. Because she knew something no one else in that room did. Damian Rowan had just cleared Elmcroft's northern air corridor. She could almost feel it, the rumble beneath the earth, the vibration that preceded a storm. Her hand tightened on her backpack, inside not just the book, but a handwritten note folded in the back cover. A note she'd received 5 years ago in a dirty garage the day she'd met him. "Someday the world will try to erase you, Lena. When they do, don't fight. Just wait." And she did. She waited. Because part of being underestimated is knowing exactly when to turn the tables. The isolation room wasn't a cell, but it might as well have been. Glass walls, chrome door. A single chair bolted into the floor like a warning, the kind of room designed to hold people just long enough to shame them without breaking protocol. And now Lena Rowan sat inside it. Her backpack was on her lap, her posture too upright to be defeated. But the room wasn't designed to break the body. It was made to unravel the soul, to humiliate you in plain sight, while pretending you were being processed. Beyond the glass, the lounge crowd watched as though peering into a zoo exhibit. Security detention, Tier 2, violation. The digital display blinked above the door. Not that anyone cared what the code meant. They already had their version of the story, and they were ready to whisper. The first lie. "She probably forged something," muttered a man in a taupe suit as he sipped espresso from a baccarat glass. "Or worse," said his wife, lips barely moving. "A stalker. These billionaires collect them like moths." "Look at the bag," added a teen influencer. "Canvas seriously? She's either poor or pretending." In the center of the lounge, a group of tech executives leaned in like hyenas over data. "You don't just walk into Elmcroft," scoffed a man in a silver watch that ticked louder than his voice. "That's Damian Rowan's jet space. That hoodie chick is a nobody." A grifter said another. "Rowan's got a clean record. He wouldn't touch someone like her. Must be a decoy." Danica spins the narrative. Danica Moreau tapped her tablet with lacquered nails, already composing her version of events for the internal report. Unknown female individual, possible false identity, claimed association with Rowan, Stratodynamics, CEO, refused verification, protocol, escalated to Tier 2 per Skyport regulation. She paused, then added almost with relish, subject appeared unstable, clothing inconsistent with verified passengers, advised precaution. She glanced toward the isolation room. Lena's face was unreadable. Danica smirked. "She'll be gone in 20 minutes. Inside the glass. Lena's eyes scanned the empty room. No clock, no window, just her reflection. Staring back. Hoodie frayed at the cuffs. Cheeks hollow from a skipped lunch, the ghost of a bruise under her wrist from weeks ago. Not from abuse, from work. She still repaired jet stabilizers by hand when she had time. People said billionaires didn't do manual labor. They were right. But Lena Rowan wasn't born into billionaire life. She met Damian in a hangar in Arizona. She was fixing a pressure valve with duct tape and a scalpel when he walked in. Said nothing for 10 minutes, then handed her a blueprint. That day she didn't ask who he was. She just asked for a wrench. The watchers turned cruel, the lounge murmurs had turned from disbelief to derision. Now they were emboldened. "She must have seduced someone," said an older man with a championship polo pin. A model seated nearby whispered, "Maybe she's from a shelter. Damian's doing a charity case." "Or she stole credentials," said a young startup founder. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried to scam their way onto a jet. They laughed, and the laughter echoed like coins in a hollow jar. Not a single person asked her name. Not one tried to find out the truth. Because the truth was inconvenient. The lie was far more entertaining. The daughter of Ironvale. Lena's thoughts drifted backward. She'd grown up in Ironvale, a town where the wind hit harder than luck, where her father repaired turbine blades for mining drones, and her mother ran out of breath before she ran out of life. At 16, Lena rewired her first avionics board. At 18, she reverse-engineered a propulsion simulator from spare parts. She'd never been to prom, but she once stabilized an emergency drone during a wildfire, using nothing but code written on napkins. That backpack they mocked, it had carried her blueprints through 3 continents. That hoodie, it was her mother's, the last thing she ever mended. Trent begins to question security officer Trent Wallace had watched enough people over the years to know when someone was bluffing, and Lena Rowan wasn't bluffing. She didn't flinch under pressure, didn't beg, didn't protest. She waited. With an unsettling calm that made him question everything. She claimed Damian Rowan, he muttered aloud. Danica, hearing him, snapped. People claim things all the time. That's what scammers do. But she didn't argue, Trent said, frowning. She didn't need to. She's playing a long con. Just do your job. But Trent couldn't stop wondering, what if she wasn't? A ticking storm. Outside, the skies shifted. The air traffic tower received a signal they hadn't seen in years. Call sign, PHX DR9X. Authorization eyes only. Rowan Stratodynamics, sovereign access. Danica received a ping on her private comm. She frowned. Incoming aircraft. Unregistered, but pre-cleared, code, Black Iris. She paled. Only one person in the world had that code. Her hands trembled slightly. Lena's smile. In the glass room, Lena felt it. Before the jet, before the noise, before the arrival. She always knew when Damian was close. Some people believed in fate. She believed in physics. And right now, the air was shifting. Molecules contracting. Pressure changing. He was here. Her reflection met her own gaze. And she allowed herself something rare, a smile. Danica's last command. Clear the runway now. Danica snapped into her comm, trying to compose herself. But it was too late. A thunderous roar filled the terminal. The windows shivered. The Phantom Lux Na X descended like a blade from the heavens, sleek matte black, marked only by the Rowan insignia, a single silver triangle against obsidian. Passengers rushed to the glass walls. Whispers turned into frantic speculation. Is that him? No way. It's Damian Rowan. But why here? In the isolation room, Lena rose slowly and waited. The Phantom Luxus 9X touched down like a ghost. No fanfare, no delay, just power made silent by precision. The kind of aircraft no one could afford to build unless they had rewritten the rules of aerospace. Only one man owned that model. Only one man flew it himself. Damian Rowan didn't outsource control. He was control. As the jet taxied to a halt, a black-clad ground crew emerged from nowhere, flanking the aircraft like shadows cast by power. The hangar lights reflected off its fuselage, like moonlight on obsidian. Inside the VIP terminal, panic replaced gossip. Even Danica Moreau's perfect posture faltered. Her tablet slipped slightly from her grip. The whispers around her erupted. Damian Rowan? Really? No way she knew him. That girl in the hoodie was telling the truth. Danica turned to Trent Wallace, voice trembling. Where is she? Trent didn't speak. He was already moving toward Isolation Room 3. The walk. The terminal's private corridor slid open with a whisper of air pressure. A breeze trailed in behind Damian Rowan, pushing through the silence. He walked like he'd been summoned by destiny. Black button-down shirt sleeves rolled up to the elbows, a fine sheen of post-flight sweat across his brow. No security, no assistant, just him, and a stare that made men forget their rank. The lounge fell quiet as he entered. Those who had laughed now stared. Those who had whispered now held their breath. No one dared speak, except Danica. She stepped forward, voice sweet, trembling. Mr. Rowan, welcome to Elmcroft. There appears to be a small misunderstanding, He didn't even stop walking, didn't glance at her, didn't blink. His only words were, "Where is my wife?" The room breaks. Lena sat calmly inside the isolation room. The hum of the terminal dimmed as footsteps approached. The lock clicked. The door slid open, and Damian Rowan stood there. The first words he spoke weren't for the crowd, not for the staff, not for the ones who judged her. They were for her. You okay, baby? Her smile was quiet, earned. Took you long enough. He exhaled something between relief and rage. Then he reached for her hand, and the moment their fingers touched, the world changed. Because now, it had context. The girl in the hoodie wasn't a mistake. She was the only thing that mattered. The terminal shatters. Damian turned, hands still in hers. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It cut like a scalpel. Who authorized this? No one answered. He stepped into the center of the lounge, Lena beside him. My wife. The woman you mocked. The woman you detained like a criminal. She's the lead systems architect for Earth.9. She designs the very aircraft this terminal services. Silence. And you all laughed. Danica stepped forward breathless. Sir. She gave no credentials. She didn't need to. My name is her credential. Gasps, audible, real. The air thickened with disbelief, then dread. Names on ice. Damien raised his tablet. A live broadcast streamed on its screen, internal feeds from the terminal. Every insult, every sneer, every slander. Recorded. Effective immediately, Rowan Stratodynamics is terminating all contracts with Elmcroft Skyport, he said. 70% ownership, gone. Every passenger who participated in the humiliation blacklisted. He tapped a command. A ripple of alerts buzzed across wrists and pockets. Memberships revoked. Cards deactivated. Security clearances null. Danica's tablet darkened. Her hands began to shake. The verdict. Damien turned to Trent. You detained my wife. Trent swallowed. I didn't know. You didn't ask. He turned to Danica. You treated her like dirt. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. You're dismissed, blacklisted from every Rowan property, forever. Danica's face drained of color. Lena watched quietly, not with spite, but with clarity. She didn't need revenge. The truth had arrived in the form of justice. Lena's crown. The elites watched as Damien turned to Lena, his voice now soft. You want to go? She looked around once at the glass, the marble, the trembling crowd, then nodded. Let's leave. And together they walked toward the waiting car on the tarmac. The room behind them didn't move. Couldn't. Not after witnessing what it had just seen. That the woman they'd humiliated now walked out like a queen. The silence didn't lift when Lena and Damien left the terminal. It deepened. It clung to the air like static before a storm coiling in the chandeliers, wrapping around every velvet sofa and platinum membership card like an invisible noose. Inside the glass cathedral of the Elmcroft Skyport VIP lounge, the temperature had shifted, not the climate. The hierarchy. Danica's fall. Danica Moreau stood frozen. For years, she'd curated her domain like a museum of exclusivity, where elegance was measured in designer seams and eye contact was a privilege. She had escorted royalty, denied diplomats, she had made the rules, and now her name was nothing. Her access badge flashed red. The tablet in her hand vibrated once, then went black. An email loaded before the shutdown. Subject termination notice. Violation of protocol. No negotiation. No review. Just exile. A slow gasp rose behind her. One of the junior receptionists, Clara, stepped back instinctively as if Danica carried a contagion. And in a way, she did. Failure at this altitude was contagious, fatal. Danica turned toward the staff hallway, but the door no longer responded to her ID. Locked out. Literally, the whispers change. The passengers moments ago drunk with amusement were now sobering in real time. Their jokes now hung like bruises in the air. A few tried to rationalize. I didn't say anything directly. I just watched. She didn't look like Rowan's wife. How were we supposed to know? But it was no use. They had laughed. They had looked away. And now the reckoning was moving down the row. The membership massacre. Within minutes, notifications exploded across high-end phones and luxury smartwatches. Sapphire Lounge. Access revoked. Priority, jet protocols suspended. All Rowan-affiliated benefits terminated indefinitely. Every individual who had mocked Lena or stood idle during her public dehumanization was now persona non grata. Across the room, a hedge fund manager tried scanning his black-tier Amex card at the lounge bar. Declined. A warning flashed. This benefit has been permanently disabled by Rowan Stratodynamics. He paled. This is a mistake. No one answered. The bartender, seeing the notice, quietly slid his drink away. Security folded inwards. Trent Wallace, the once feared head of VIP security, stood at the edge of the terminal floor, motionless. Damien Rowan had not fired him with words. He'd done it with silence. His badge deactivated, his presence now a liability. 2 internal affairs officers arrived, silent, suited, and efficient. You'll surrender your badge, sir. You'll also surrender your weapons credentials and travel privileges tied to Rowan-operated terminals. You will not re-enter classified zones from this point forward. Trent didn't argue, but he did look toward the glass where Lena had once stood. And for the first time in a decade, he felt shame. Real searing shame. Clara's reckoning. Clara Holt, who'd once taken pride in her ability to filter out the undesirables, received her reckoning next. Her iPad screen cracked not physically, but symbolically, as her administrative permissions were revoked line by line. The smirk she wore earlier vanished. She had been proud of gatekeeping. Now she was locked out of every gate. This is insane, she said, trying to access the concierge panel. I only followed protocol, but even the system refused to acknowledge her login. Her voice faded beneath the sound of finality. The collapse is broadcast. Someone inside the lounge had recorded the moment Damien revealed Lena's identity. That clip had already gone viral. Across the world, the video was being streamed under titles like, "Billionaire destroys elitist lounge after wife is humiliated." The quiet woman in a hoodie who brought Elmcroft to its knees. Power isn't worn, it's carried. Comment threads overflowed with fury and admiration. She didn't have to say a word. She just stood her ground. This is what dignity looks like. That's the kind of man you marry, one who makes the world kneel when you've been wronged. What they didn't know about Lena. What the world was just learning, Damien had known all along. Lena had never been interested in titles. She had turned down 7 interviews with aerospace media outlets because she didn't want credit, she wanted clarity, precision, truth. Her designs had saved more lives than most heads of state, but she still carried her old hoodie from Iron Vale, still wore the shoes her father had bought before his last surgery. Because Lena Rowan didn't need the world to clap for her. She needed the world to stop pretending class came from couture, a room rewritten. That night, the Elmcroft VIP Lounge changed forever. Vanity mirrors were replaced with windows, status symbols stripped from the guest wall. New signage posted, "Respect is not an accessory." This terminal now operates under the Lena Rowan Protocol. No individual shall be judged by appearance, attire, or wealth. Access is earned through humanity, not hardware. Danica's exit. Danica walked alone down the terminal tunnel. No staff escorted her. No cameras followed. Her suitcase rolled over tile like a shamed metronome. The last thing she saw before boarding a standard commercial flight was a glowing ad display already updated. A woman in a hoodie, a canvas backpack, and beneath it, she didn't need to dress the part. She just needed to walk in. And the world knelt. Danica swallowed hard and boarded her middle seat. The world watches. In the days that followed, Lena Rowan became a symbol, not of scandal, but of silence, of dignity, of every woman who ever sat still in a room of ridicule and held her ground until someone who truly saw her stood. The world now knew her name, but Lena Rowan didn't crave applause. She didn't scroll the headlines, didn't read the millions of comments flooding in under her photo in the hoodie. She didn't accept any of the speaking engagements the influencer offers, the editorials begging her to tell her side, because her side had already been told in silence. Instead, Lena returned to what she did best, building engines that could rewrite the laws of gravity. But the world had changed, and this time it had followed her home. A company transformed, Rowan Stratodynamics was a fortress of intellect, one of the few companies where engineers outranked executives, and where the dress code quietly read, "Just wear something clean." Still, even here, Lena had once operated in the shadows. She was known as the architect in the corner, the girl with sketches taped over her screens, the woman who solved mathematical anomalies before coffee, but never claimed credit on investor slides. Until now, because when Damien Rowan walked into the Monday board meeting following the Elmcroft incident, he said just one thing: "Meet your new chief vision officer." And every neck turned. Lena walked in, hoodie zipped halfway up, sleeves rolled, a graphite mechanical pencil behind her ear. They remembered. Every executive in that room had once passed her in the hallway unaware. Some had nodded, some had ignored, a few had dismissed her as an assistant. Now she stood before them not with dominance, but with direction. "We design vessels that defy physics," she began, voice even. "But in the process, we've forgotten how to defy social gravity." She paused. That ends now. The Lena Rowan Protocol. Within weeks, the Lena Rowan Protocol wasn't just a sign at Elmcroft. It became a standard first across Rowan Stratodynamics facilities, then across its subsidiaries. Key tenets: no employee could be judged based on attire, background, or perceived wealth. Frontline workers would rotate into leadership meetings quarterly. All corporate lounges were to be redesigned with access policies based on purpose, not privilege. Other companies mocked it, then mimicked it, because clients noticed, and so did the press. Not the kind of press that sensationalized, the kind that watched culture shift. The backlash and the blowtorch. But not everyone celebrated Lena's rise. Old power circles muttered about unearned influence. Some tabloids speculated about a quiet coup inside Rowan Stratodynamics. And at an aerospace summit in Geneva, a prominent CEO of a rival firm dared to joke during his keynote, "You can't just let hoodie girls redesign the sky." He chuckled. The room did not, because that same week his proposal for a joint satellite contract was rejected by unanimous Rowan board vote. His name never returned to the table. A visit from the past. One evening, as the desert winds whispered through the windows of their Arizona home, Lena opened a letter with no return address. Inside was a photo, her age 16, working beneath a drone's wing in Iron Vale. On the back, a single line: "You were always meant to fly above them." No signature, but she knew the handwriting. Her father. He'd passed years ago, but someone had kept this. She sat on the porch for hours after backpack at her feet, hoodie sleeves pushed up to her elbows. Elmcroft reopens months later. Elmcroft's skyport held a formal reopening under new ownership. The chandeliers remained, but the marble had been repolished with workers' names etched into the base. The new executive lounge had no dress code. At the center of the terminal stood a permanent sculpture, a simple bronze figure of a woman standing with her head high, wearing a hoodie, one hand holding a canvas backpack. The plaque read, "She didn't enter to prove anything, but when the world tried to erase her, she rewrote the sky." A young girl stares. The day the sculpture was unveiled, a teenage girl from the general terminal peeked through the velvet rope. She wore secondhand jeans, a frayed flannel shirt, a janitor badge clipped to her belt. She stared at the statue for a long time, then turned to her mother, whispering, "Maybe I can work on planes one day too." Her mother smiled. "You already work near them." That's how it starts. And Lena watched quietly. From a distance, Lena saw the girl. Didn't interrupt, didn't declare herself. She just watched the spark ignite. Because for her, the greatest reward wasn't the apology of the elites. It was the permission she gave to the unseen. The whisper that said, "You belong, even when they say you don't." Long before the world bowed to her silence. Before the private terminals and press features. Before the hoodie became a symbol. She was just Lena. And back then, Lena didn't own anything that couldn't be carried in a backpack or coded in her head. This part of the story doesn't take place in boardrooms or terminals. It starts in a town with no airport at all. Ironvale 6 years ago. A place where the air always smelled like rust. Where the only jet most people saw was a military flyover once a year during Founders Day. Where aerospace was something people said on TV, not something kids believed could belong to them. But Lena did. Not because she had permission, but because she had tools, and a brain that saw engines not as machines, but as puzzles with breath. She fixed things no one else could. Built things with scrap. Learned fluid dynamics from an old textbook, found in a dumpster behind Ironvale High. She knew how to calculate airflow using nothing but a plastic ruler and a kitchen scale. No one taught her, but no one could stop her either. A girl in the garage. Her mother had turned their shed into a workshop. Oil-stained posters on corrugated walls, shelves of mismatched bolts, a second-hand soldering iron that sparked like lightning every time it plugged in. It was here that Lena rebuilt her first thruster. It didn't look like much. Aluminum scraps wiring from an abandoned dryer, a control board shaped like a misshapen heart. But it worked. And when it roared to life on their cracked driveway for 3 seconds, Lena Rowan made something fly. 3 seconds was all she needed to know. She wasn't meant to stay grounded. They laughed. Then, too. At school, the teachers praised her handwriting, but not her mind. "She's good with machines," they'd say like it was a consolation prize. Classmates teased her over her clothes, over her quiet, over the way she never raised her hand, but always got full marks on the hardest physics questions. They called her Garage Girl, mocked her notebook sketches of propulsion chambers and suborbital lift systems. She didn't argue. She just built. The night that changed it all, at 19, Lena entered a national youth engineering competition illegally. She forged her enrollment at a community college just to qualify. She mailed her design in a manila envelope without sponsorship or school letterhead. Just a model, a blueprint, and a handwritten note that read, "It works. If you test it, you'll see." She didn't expect to win. She just needed one person to look, and someone did. Damien's first glimpse. It wasn't the judges who noticed. It was Damien Rowan. He had stopped by the competition exhibit on his way to a satellite launch. He didn't even plan to stay. But one design caught his eye. Something hand-drawn, annotated in pencil, with margins covered in frantic math. Not pretty, but brilliant. "Who's this from?" he asked. A judge shrugged. Some kid from Ironvale, probably just a tech hobbyist. But Damien saw the code. He saw the logic. He saw her name signed at the bottom of the blueprint. L.M. Rowan. Their first meeting, 3 months later. He found her working night shifts in a repair bay outside Phoenix. She didn't know who he was. She was elbow deep in a gearbox, welding a joint that shouldn't have existed. Damien stood there silently watching. When she noticed him, she wiped her forehead, nodded, and said, "You're in my light?" He smiled. "I think I'm standing in your future." She didn't laugh. She just offered him the wrench. No promises. He never tried to impress her. Didn't name drop. Didn't flash wealth. Didn't condescend. He just asked questions, real ones, and she answered them with equations and drawings and a kind of clarity that cut through his world of power games and polished strategies. They didn't fall in love quickly. They fell in trust first, before the jet, before the world. There was a desert. Two minds sketching flight patterns on chalkboards stolen from a school auction. There were test flights at dawn, coffee poured into metal mugs. Lena, writing code on her knee, while Damien held a flashlight between his teeth. There was a private vow made under desert stars. No camera, no diamond, just hands held and the words, "No matter what altitude we reach, let's always land in truth." She never needed a throne. And that's the part no one understood during the Elmcroft humiliation. She didn't walk in with shame. She walked in remembering who she was before she was Mrs. Rowan. Before the jet, before the name, before the titles, just Lena. Garage girl, airflow thief, sky-bending, grit-built, blueprint-scribbling daughter of Ironvale. The girl who rewrote the sky with nothing but silence and a soldering iron. 10 months later, the same marble floor, the same velvet ropes, the chandeliers, the polished glass. But this time Elmcroft didn't feel like a cathedral of gatekeeping. It felt like something else, something accountable. And they were waiting, not for the rich, but for her. They'd sent formal invitations, platinum foiled, signed by the interim board. "We respectfully request your presence to unveil the new Elmcroft terminal and honor your contribution to its transformation." Lena hadn't RSVP'd. She didn't need to, because this time when she stepped inside the terminal, the scanner didn't blink red. It glowed white. Security didn't stop her. They stood at attention and bowed. The woman in gray, she wore a gray blouse. Simple, elegant, a soft cotton blend, not couture. No entourage, no flash. Just Lena and her backpack, the same one. And across the hall, the media had assembled. But they didn't crowd her, not after what happened the last time. The world had learned, you don't shove cameras in the face of a woman who could bring down an empire with her silence. So they stood still and waited. The ceremony? The interim director approached. He was sweating not because of the lights, but because of the moment. He offered her the podium. She politely declined. Instead, she walked to the center of the room where the new statue stood. A bronze figure of a woman holding a backpack facing forward, chin high. Etched beneath it, Lena Rowan. Proof that grace speaks louder than gold, that power doesn't whisper through fabric, but through principle. Lena reached out and ran her fingers along the edge of the statue's sleeve. Not for show, for memory. The crowd watches differently now. A woman with her daughter stepped forward. The girl no older than 10 clutched a journal, filled with sketches, duct-taped binding, penciled wings. The mother whispered, "That's her sweetheart." The woman who changed it all. The girl walked to Lena, timid, trembling, held out the journal. Lena knelt. "Want to show me?" The girl opened to a diagram, a rough rocket sketch. Lena studied it, then asked, "What's your thrust ratio on this?" The girl grinned wide. 2.3 if I can get the right fuel mix." Lena smiled back. "Then you've already flown?" A manager humbled near the far wall. Vanessa Klein stood. No press pass, no credentials, just a guest. She had disappeared from aviation after her dismissal, quietly blacklisted by every terminal Damien Rowan touched. Her Versace days were over. Today she wore navy slacks, a blouse from a rack store, and a pair of sensible flats. And no one recognized her, until Lena did. Their eyes met, not with vengeance, but with knowing. Vanessa swallowed. "I was wrong." Lena nodded. "I know. Do you forgive me?" Lena thought for a long beat, then answered softly, "I outgrew the need to hold it." What forgiveness looks like. The crowd didn't hear their exchange. It wasn't public, wasn't for applause. But when Vanessa walked away, there were tears in her eyes. And when Lena turned back toward the statue, it gleamed just a little brighter under the lights, back to the sky. After the ceremony, Lena didn't stay for the interviews or the cocktail toasts. She walked out to the tarmac where a Matisse silver jet awaited Rowan Stratodynamics' newest model. She paused at the steps, looked back one more time, not to relive the past, but to acknowledge it, because it was this place, this room, this cruelty that had revealed something deeper. That silence is not surrender, that some truths only sound like thunder when the right voice speaks them quietly. The engines purred beneath her seat. Soft, smooth, silent, like they were obeying her presence, not just physics. Lena sat near the window alone in the cabin, not because she needed space, but because space had learned to respect her. Across the aisle, the empty leather chair wasn't just a seat. It was a symbol. Once upon a time, they wouldn't have let her stand near it. Now no one dared sit in it unless she offered it. But power to Lena Rowan was never meant to be a throne. It was a tool, and she was just beginning to use it. Power used quietly. Since the Elmcroft fallout, Lena had received hundreds of requests, endorsements, tech leadership roles, presidential roundtable invites, but she declined most of them, not because she wasn't qualified, but because visibility wasn't her goal. She didn't want the world to watch her rise. She wanted to leave it better. She funneled Rowan Stratodynamics funding into flight education programs for low-income girls, veteran mechanics recertification schools, AI-powered accessibility devices for disabled aerospace workers. And none of it had her name on the press release. Only her fingerprint in the design. The Mentor Program. At headquarters, she established a mentorship rotation, not with board members, with technicians, interns, dropouts who had been building drones in their backyards and getting laughed out of classrooms. Every 3 months, 10 new mentees, no resumes, no degrees, only proof of passion. And they called it the Iron Veil Initiative, because she hadn't forgotten where she came from, and she never would. A conversation with Damien one night sitting on the rooftop of their Arizona compound under a sky so clear it looked digitally enhanced. Damien handed Lena a cup of black tea. They sat in silence, until he asked, "Do you ever wish the Elmcroft thing never happened?" She sipped thoughtful. Then, no, not even the isolation room. The insults. Especially that. He watched her, quietly proud. Because now, she nodded. Now I know what I'm supposed to do with what we've built. The woman in the mirror. Lena rarely looked at herself in mirrors for long. Not out of vanity, out of efficiency. But that night, as she brushed her hair, she paused, looked into her own eyes, and saw not the girl from Iron Veil, not the woman in the hoodie, not even the figure cast in bronze in a terminal she never asked to conquer, but a force, not because the world gave her permission, but because she stopped asking for it. They tried to diminish her by mocking her clothes, by questioning her right to exist in a room she helped invent, but what they didn't realize was Lena Rowan had already mastered the hardest engineering feat in human history. She learned how to take pressure and turn it into lift. The sky now opened that jet. The one she sat in. It wasn't just a flight. It was her latest design. A subsonic, eco-neutral AI, stabilized aircraft that ran quieter than the whisper of silk. But she didn't brag about that. She just opened her journal and made a note. Phase 2 expand, Iron Veil initiative to Europe, begin scouting schools in post-industrial towns, find more Lenas. Justice isn't a moment, it's a process. And Lena had committed to staying in it. Not for recognition, not for revenge, but because power unused becomes rot, and she didn't rebuild her life to let it decay. Before the engines roared, just before takeoff, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Mrs. Rowan, we're clear for departure. Anything you need." She pressed the comm button. "Just one thing." "Yes, ma'am." She smiled. "Don't go easy on the speed. I've spent enough time grounded." The jet rolled forward and lifted, not just into sky, but into legacy. The headlines faded. The social media cycles moved on, but inside certain offices, inside certain lounges, inside certain people, it didn't fade because some wounds don't scar, they stay open. And for those who laughed the loudest or said nothing at all, silence had become a shadow that followed them into every conference room and onto every flight. The lounge staff who remained. Elmcroft didn't fire everyone. Some staff, mostly young, quiet, and overlooked, had tried to intervene that day, had spoken gently to Lena, had questioned the orders, had hesitated when others marched. They were given the chance to stay, but first they were asked a question by a Rowan HR auditor. "Why didn't you stop it?" The room was silent, until a girl named Esme, no older than 24, whispered, "Because I thought I would lose everything." The auditor nodded. "Now you understand what she risked by standing still." They kept their jobs, but they worked differently. The invisible cost. The others. The bystanders in 900 shoes. They weren't fired. They were forgotten. And for some that was worse. Job offers stopped arriving. Meeting invites dried up. 1,000 little things disappeared. Emails never returned. Phone calls routed to voicemail. Black cards declined on upgrades. Their reputations didn't crash overnight. They just eroded because the world had changed, and silence had become a stain no branding could scrub out. The fall of Charles Reeve. Charles had been the CEO of a luxury flight brand at the time of the incident. He hadn't mocked Lena. He hadn't said anything. But he had stood next to Vanessa Klein laughing. He had called her a security risk in a leaked message to a partner terminal. And when Rowan Stratodynamics acquired his company 9 months later, his name was nowhere in the retention plan. He filed suit. He lost. His LinkedIn page now read, "Currently exploring opportunities." But everyone in aviation knew, quiet cruelty doesn't just echo, it sticks. The whisper network shifts behind closed doors among elites. Something began to shift. Not everyone changed their hearts, but they changed their behaviors. Because they were being watched now. Because every lounge had a story, and every hooded figure could be a Lena. Suddenly, receptionists double-checked before dismissing a guest. Security guards asked questions instead of barking orders. Executives took meetings with interns just in case. Because what happened once could happen again. The woman in the elevator. A year after Elmcroft in a San Francisco tech tower, an executive barked at a woman in plain flats and no ID badge. "You don't belong on this floor. This is for founders only." She turned to him, smiled. "Then you'll want to know I'm buying the building." The elevator dinged. She stepped off. He never forgot her face. Even years later, because in that one instant he thought, is she another Lena? The power of not forgetting. Elmcroft didn't stay in Elmcroft. It became a metaphor. A parable passed between HR teams, taught in ethics seminars, whispered in first-class lounges. You never know who you're speaking to. Don't judge the backpack. Ask for the name, not the outfit. And so, the lesson lived on. But Lana never said another word about that day. Because those who learn the lesson the right way, learn it in your silence. Damien's quiet defense. Even in Damien's world filled with suits and steel, the reverberations continued. A major partner once joked at dinner, "What's next? Letting janitors build rockets." Damien set his fork down. No anger, just truth. "You joke, but the one who built ours used to mop a hangar for tuition." Silence. The deal ended there. Damien didn't mind, because the sky wasn't for sale, not anymore. No trumpets, no confetti, no spotlights followed her as the world slowly reshaped itself in her quiet silhouette. Because real change doesn't scream, it lands like a jet in fog. You don't always hear it coming, but when it touches down, everything trembles. 2 years later, the Rowan launch facility. Desert winds swept across the launch pad. A massive structure loomed in the background. Brushed titanium matted black panels absorbing the Arizona sun. Rowan Stratodynamics was preparing to launch Orion 4, the first manned suborbital craft co-designed by civilian engineers from non-traditional backgrounds. 10 crew members, 3 former janitors, 1 former barista, 4 teenage girls from the Iron Veil Initiative, 1 mother of 3 who once repaired lawnmowers in a garage. And at the helm of mission control, Lena Rowan, still in soft clothes, still without title frills, still with her backpack slung over the back of her chair, its zipper slightly frayed. The world watched. They live-streamed the launch to every terminal in the world, not from an ornate gala, but from a folding chair in a converted steel hangar. And as the countdown echoed, the announcer didn't mention their wealth. He didn't recite corporate sponsors. He read aloud a quote Lena had taped above the launch interface. "We lift, not because we wear suits, but because we carry others." At T-0, the craft surged upward, flame and glory trailing behind it. But the real fire had started long before. It started in a woman who had once been told her backpack didn't belong in a room full of gold. Back at Elmcroft, the bronze statue still stood. Tourists took photos, yes, but many didn't just look. They sat on the bench beside it. They read the plaque out loud to their children. They whispered thank yous, and every now and then someone would leave a token at the base. A model plane, a rolled-up engineering sketch, a folded hoodie. No one cleaned them up because they weren't trash. They were testimonies. Lena never claimed credit. She didn't update her social profiles. She didn't post think pieces or wear her success like armor. She just built better systems. She hired smarter voices. She handed the mic to those still learning how to speak. Because Lena Rowan didn't need to be remembered as the woman who humiliated a terminal. She wanted to be remembered as the woman who opened its doors. One last flight, years later, long after the first suborbital return capsule touched down, Lena took a solo flight over Iron Veil. No press, no fanfare. Just her and the sky. She looked out the window at the stretch of rust-colored land below. She remembered the shed, the blueprint, the jokes, the day she was told to leave a room she helped build. And she smiled, not with bitterness, not with triumph, but with the quiet peace of someone who'd already won because she never wanted to wear a crown. She only ever wanted to fly. And now, she had given flight to thousands. Epilogue. A letter found in the archives of Rowan Stratodynamics sealed in a simple black envelope. One final note exists. It was handwritten, unsent, addressed. To the next girl who walks into a room they say she doesn't belong in. Inside it read, "You're not the problem. You're the proof. Keep your backpack close. Keep your silence sharp. You're about to show them how high grace can fly." LR. Final line. She walked into that lounge wearing a hoodie. She left owning the sky. Would you kneel or rise like her? Let us know in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories that prove dignity is louder than gold.